Good afternoon and welcome, and can I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Wurundjeri people, and to pay my respects to their elders past and present. So I want to thank not only Andrew for the very kind introduction, but for being a great partner with the State of Victoria and the wonderful contribution you've made to the Victorian economy over a very long period of time. But also to thank Professor Steve Martin. I remember when he was Professor Stephen Martin, rather. I remember when he was just plain old Steve, the Chief Executive of CEDA, for inviting me back to speak here today. I understand, Stephen, that you'll soon be stepping down from the role later this year, and my congratulations on all that you've done. Well, we're certainly living in interesting times, and we've had Brexit. We've had that thing that I'm not allowed to mention, an election of a new US president. While the full impact of these events remain soon to be seen, they do add to the uncertainty surrounding the global economy and financial markets. In its recent World Economic Outlook update, while the IMF left global growth projections unchanged and even marginally increased US growth expectations, it noted uncertainty around the impact of President Trump's economic and trade policies. Not that that's been reflected in stock market returns since his election. And I think it's fair to say that globally these are unprecedented, even tumultuous political times. So closer to home, however, the things are thankfully more stable and signs, I think, more positive. The Victorian economy remains strong. Our economic and budgetary position is the envy of the nation and currently dwarfs the resource-rich states. When it comes to creating jobs, managing debt and opening doors to international markets, Victoria is leading the nation. Nearly 200,000 new jobs have been created since the Andrews Labor government came to office. And in 2016, there were more new jobs created in Victoria than the rest of the nation combined. Our population is growing faster than any other state, at 2.1% a year, and our service exports were up 4% in the 2015-16 year. Our gross state product increased by 3.3% in 15-16, representing 22.5% of the nation's output. This strong economic record is a result of many contributions from workers to private sector innovators to teachers training the Victorian workforce of the future. As a government, we've also played an active role in driving economic growth, investing billions in infrastructure and services that Victorians need while maintaining, of course, responsible budget surpluses. Governments must maintain fiscal discipline during times of prosperity, ensuring sufficient capacity to respond to changing economic conditions. We've maintained that discipline, and can I assure you that we will continue to do so. It's why the upcoming budget will be different to the two that preceded it. It will be a leaner budget, consolidating the investments and commitments that we've made coming to government. But I'll have to say a bit more about that budget later in the address. Despite the strengths of the Victorian economy, 2016 was the year that economic transformation arrived for many Victorians. The transformation is being driven by a host of factors, including the slowing down of the mining boom and the fact that some of Victoria's key industries have gradually lost market share in a globalised economy. Clearly, we're moving from an industrial economy based on manufacturing to one predominantly based on services. I'm referring specifically to the retail, tourism, education, technology, healthcare and professional services sectors. Manufacturing is giving way to the growing strength of the high-skilled services sector. In the past year, Ford closed its factory in Geelong and Broadmeadows. Toyota recently announced a closure date for its Altona plant, and this will mark the end of 90 years of car manufacturing in Victoria. And then, of course, there's the impending closure of the Hazelwood Power Station. Now, undoubtedly, these closures are gut-wrenching for the workers, their families and their communities. While Britain and the US may look inwards and to the past, Victoria's economic resilience is underpinned by our openness, our access to global markets and a willingness to innovate, adapt and look to the future. To ensure these benefits are not lost, governments must be willing to listen, to empathise and to act. Governments must strike a balance between today's challenges and tomorrow's. So I'd like to touch on some of the ways that the Andrews government has responded. I can assure you that these are not just talking points. This is real action backed by a genuine commitment and by a long-term plan. They represent a small piece of the puzzle, but they demonstrate our willingness to manage the present as custodians of the future. In terms of the automotive closures, with little to no help from the federal government, we've provided more than $130 million of assistance, funding programs and training for workers, businesses and communities. We established special funds for Geelong and the northern suburbs of Melbourne, focused solely on job creation. We established new skills and job centres across the TAFE network that helped automotive workers access skills retraining, careers advice and job support services. Rather than abandoning these workers or treating them as mere statistics, we're working with them, capitalising on their remarkable range of skills and ensuring that they're not left behind in a rapidly transforming economy. This is also the case with the announced closure of the Hazelwood power plant. Again, we struck a balance between the immediate needs of the Hazelwood workers, the community, and the long-term realities of an evolving economy. Our $266 million assistance package goes well beyond a quick fix. It's geared towards both today's and future generations of Latrobe Valley workers. It includes an economic growth zone in the area, providing financial incentives to companies ready to start or expand their businesses in the valley. We've established a dedicated Latrobe Valley Authority to help manage the transition and future economic development of the area. And we will zero in on the valley's burgeoning sectors, particularly new energy, health, food and fibre and professional services. This long-term thinking, this willingness to prepare and to plan for the future reflects the Andrews government's willingness to act to manage the economic transformation that Victorians are experiencing, not just by looking after today's workers, but by helping to create the jobs of tomorrow. Victoria has always been different. We've always punched above our weight and we've always evolved and adapted. We've grown from a sheep station to a gold mine to a manufacturing hub to today's knowledge economy. We represent just 3% of the nation's landmass, but account for nearly a quarter of Australia's economic activity. We boast the highest share of tertiary qualified people of all states. We attract smart, creative, dynamic people, and our economy follows suit. Indeed, Victoria boasts the highest gains from interstate migration in the nation. Compared with the rest of Australia, our economy is more labour intensive, more dominated by the household economy and more services based. It's essential, therefore, that we play to our strengths and we also invest in the jobs of the future. It's why we've allocated $297 million in last year's budget to industries where we have a distinct competitive advantage. These include medical technologies and pharmaceuticals, new energy technologies, food and fibre, international education, professional services and construction technology. It means a potential $70 billion boost in economic output and 400,000 new jobs by 2025. It aligns with our strong record on job creation and certainly aligns with our big picture view of the state's future infrastructure needs, thinking about strategies to manage demand, get more out of our existing assets while building the infrastructure that we need. Investing in tomorrow's infrastructure is critical to maintaining Victoria's enviable quality of life, attracting the world's best and brightest, and further strengthening our people-powered economy. We've invested billions to ease congestion, stimulating the economy, creating jobs, and enabling people and goods to move more freely in and around Melbourne and Victoria. So prior to handing down my first budget, infrastructure investment had been averaging at around $4.9 billion per annum for the preceding 11 years. Since then, in 2 short years, we've seen this average jump to $8.4 billion per year as we invest in the infrastructure that will enable Victoria to continue to grow and, of course, the economy to thrive. The Metro Tunnel is fully funded, and we've also met our funding commitments to the Western Distributor project. The Level Crossing Removal project, having removed 10 dangerous and congested crossings in 2 years, is already delivering commuter benefits. Now, these projects ease congestion, they reduce commute times, and they allow Victorians more time to do the things and to catch up with the people that they care about. So they'll give families precious extra time in the evenings. They'll save businesses thousands of hours every month. Our focus is always on the long-term prosperity of the state. It's why we're establishing Infrastructure Victoria, who provide alternative sources of objective, transparent and evidence-based advice on establishing a long-term pipeline of infrastructure. Some of their advice will be challenging. Some will be at odds with our current policies. Some of it will involve a serious and considered conversation about the role of debt. It's a conversation that comes with the territory when you establish an independent body. They seem to take it to heart. Rest assured that all future projects will be delivered prudently and properly. It's why we created the Office of Projects Victoria. We recognise that an increased investment in infrastructure needs to be matched with greater oversight and assurance to ensure that projects are delivered on time, on budget, and that the full benefits of the investments are realised. We've made these investments in infrastructure despite the federal government's continuing to shortchange Victorians, denying us our fair share of funding. Victoria makes up about 25% of the nation's population, but receives less than 8.5% of national infrastructure funding as Malcolm Turnbull continues to send billions to other states. On a per capita basis, Victoria is expected to receive an average of only $82 per person per year compared to the national average of $241. It's $366 for Queenslanders and $253 per person in New South Wales. Despite the challenges of a Sydney-focused Prime Minister and an economy that is transforming, the Andrews government has delivered on its commitment to the Victorian people. When we were elected in 2014, we were upfront about who we were, what we wanted to do and what we stood for. We said we'd secure strong operating surpluses. We said we'd maintain the state's discipline required for a AAA credit rating. We said we wouldn't perpetuate the haves and have-nots mentality, and that we recognise the challenges of intergenerational inequity. We said that ours would be a government for all Victorians, not just those who live close to Melbourne. And we said we'd be a modern Labor government, a government that's prepared to harness the power of capital to help build a better, and might I say, a fairer society. The community backed us, and we've kept our word. We've invested over $20 billion in the building blocks of any fair and inclusive and prosperous society. We've rebuilt and renovated dozens of schools, making them bigger, cleaner and safer. We've helped revive a TAFE system that was down for the count. We've delivered more beds, more nurses and more surgeries. In the last year alone, we've invested in hundreds of new paramedics that we've significantly boosted our social housing supply, and we've implemented the largest single investment in the history of Victoria's police force, with over 3,000 new officers coming online. They're socially progressive, fiscally responsible investments that are born of strong surpluses and sound economic management. But we're not patting ourselves on the back. As we approach the 2017-18 budget, we won't be shying away from the hard decisions that will be necessary to maintain Victoria's economic prosperity. It means a more sensible, competitive tax mix. It means a tighter and leaner budget than the two that preceded it. It means keeping net debt as a percentage of GSP at 6%, which is critical to maintaining our AAA discipline and below the level of debt we inherited from our predecessors. As Standard & Poor's wrote in a letter to me earlier this year, the finances of the state of Victoria are in strong shape, and this is one of the many factors that contributes to our AAA rating of the state. So let's be clear and let's put it beyond any doubt. The only threat to Victoria's credit rating is the federal government's inability to manage its own budget situation. We'll also continue to explore new opportunities for asset recycling. As the successful lease of the Port of Melbourne demonstrated, asset recycling is recognising the limited resources available to state governments and applying them in a forensic, and might I say, a pragmatic way. Our challenge is to invest in future generations of Victorians, to invest not just in physical infrastructure, but also in social infrastructure, to ensure that both economic productivity and a quality of life. So we'll continue to deliver for those who need it most. We may have Donald Trump in the White House, and we may have an intransigent federal government that refuses to give Victoria its fair share. But we have a state which continues to buck the national trend, that continues to evolve, and in which fairness, prosperity and opportunity remain cornerstones. Victorians, I think, rightly remain optimistic about the future and the opportunities that the future presents. Yesterday, NAB monthly business survey showed that in January, Victoria's business confidence increased by 3 points to 12, the highest of the states, and consumer confidence in Victoria remains ahead of the national average. So despite the challenges of economic transformation, we'll continue to play to our state's many strengths. We'll continue to make hard budgetary decisions where necessary. We'll continue to ensure that our expenses growth remains below revenue growth, and we'll continue to manage strong population growth. We'll continue to invest in the infrastructure needed to support all of this, and we'll continue to invest in our people, in their skills and their ideas, to ensure that all Victorians have the opportunity to benefit from our shared prosperity. Thank you very much.